All right, in today's video, we're taking another look at early reflections, particularly on vocals. On one of my recent videos about mixing for width and depth with reverb and delay, I had a great comment asking the question about whether or not early reflections are necessary on all vocals or is it specific to genre. And the simple answer is yes, they are necessary, but you don't necessarily need to go out of your way to customize them and add them because most stock reverbs today are adding a little bit of early reflections. So even if your reverb isn't specifying that it's doing that, it most likely is giving you little tastes of early reflections and giving you a blend. But what I want to flesh out today is why you would increase or customize the early reflections for the near field experience for the listener. Now, if you're fortunate enough to record your vocals in a gorgeous sounding room, then by all means, don't mess with that. Keep the sound of the room in the recording. But apart from that, what you're going to be trying to do is record it as dry as possible so you can add in the early and late reflections that you want and not be stuck with the recording of a subpar room. And the drier the recording, the more important it is to customize and cater the early reflections. And that's what we're going to dive deep into today. And then stay tuned for the end of the video. I'm going to lay out a really simple step-by-step way and show you how to set up an effects send track to get those early reflections in a way that will translate to every project that you work on. So let's dive right into this and take a look. So if you're recording a vocal in a small room, you're naturally going to pick up little bits of that room. Even if you're using a cardioid mic, there's going to be little bits of reflections coming off of the walls that are being picked up in the recording. And that's actually the reason that modern vocal booths were created. Is they were isolating out a really dead padded space so they picked up as little of the room as possible. And the reason that you want to do that is so you can customize the early reflections and not be stuck with the dimensions of your room because that might not be what you're after in your mix. Now, the consequence of using a vocal booth is that it sounds really unnatural when it's dry. You never really hear a person singing in a vocal booth. Wherever they're singing, whatever the setting is, there's always some amount of early reflections. So to answer the question as to whether or not they're necessary in every genre, the answer is yes, particularly if you're recording in a vocal booth. If you add your favorite reverb to your vocal that was recorded in a vocal booth, the ratio of early to late reflections is going to be slightly unnatural. Now, will your listener notice? Absolutely not. Your listener is engaged in enjoying the music, and our job as the mix engineers is to make it as enjoyable as possible. And one of the ways that we can do that, and why I stress not missing this opportunity, is you can use subtle ways to enhance the near field experience for the listener that they would not even notice that you've done it unless it weren't there. So yes, regardless of any genre, especially if you're recorded in a vocal booth, you're going to want to add a little bit of extra early reflections, so why not take the opportunity to customize them? So let's go back to our vocal example and take another look. So one of the reasons I like to use this vocal is because it's super dry. And that's great. We use vocal booths for a reason. So let's turn on a little bit of the long reverb, which does have some early reflections in it. It's a nice long haul reverb, but it's definitely adding some early reflections. And that's fantastic. The problem is it still sounds a little unnatural because it was recorded in a booth very, very dry. Now, if you record it in a small room, you're kind of stuck with those early reflections. They're almost impossible to remove, but you can add a little bit more that makes it sound like it was recorded in a slightly larger space. So you could add in a short room reverb and a short slapback delay that implies a bigger space than the apartment or bedroom you recorded in and dial it way back and blend it in with what's there in the original signal. So whether you've recorded in a vocal booth or in a less than ideal room, you're going to want to add those early reflections. It's just for two different reasons. The vocal booth is too dry, which is good in the sense that you have a blank slate to work with. But if you had to record in a less than ideal room, there's still a chance to add early reflections to enhance that small room to something more desirable. So that said, let's get back into this vocal recording and start adding some early reflections in. So let's add a little bit of slapback delay to this. And then we dial it way back, so it's just a hint of it. Okay, and now compare that to the dry again. Yeah, see, the dry sounds unnatural compared to just a subtle hint of a short slapback delay. One more time. Yeah, that little bit of delay is really nice. And now a touch of a short reverb. Yeah, and so we'll dial that reverb way back and the delay way back. Yeah, so there's your near field experience that's really easily accomplished. These are still turned up a little loud for what I would want for a mix, but I really want you to be able to hear them. But if we leave those on there and now we bring in our long reverb. Yeah, see, the focus is obviously on the larger expanse of the room with the bigger reverb, but those subtleties on the short ones are adding a whole new layer and dimension to it that if, let me turn them off, if they weren't there, it doesn't sound quite as natural. So it's adding an extra element of believability and realism, and it's a subtlety for the listener that's very easy to accomplish, and that's why I suggest not overlooking it. Now, if you're working in a genre where this is not typically done, and they're not taking the time to customize a near field, then this is a pretty easy technique that can actually set your mixes apart in that genre. You can have a little bit more sense of believability and realism for your listener, and these techniques also fatten up the vocal a little bit. So they're giving a little extra width and depth to the vocal without trying to accomplish the same thing with EQ. They're doing it with movement, they're doing it with space and ambience, and it's just a really great effect. So is it necessary? No, but why not? If nothing else, it's going to set your mixes apart from the other people in your genre. So I highly recommend it, and it is really simple and easy to do. But most importantly, it's creating a sense of realism for your listener that's going to affect them subconsciously. And it's not going to sound unnatural in any way because it's going to sound like it's in a real space. And that's ultimately what we're after. But you got to remember to dial it so far back that it's so subtle that it's not distracting. So here I'm going to lay out a step-by-step method where you can set up an effects send track for the near field experience for the vocal. And this is a really easy and straightforward way to set up a short reverb and short delay so it translates to any project that you work on. And you could simply save this to your template. So every time you start a new mix, this is already there and you just dial it into taste on your vocal. So we got the same vocal here, completely dry, everything turned off. And I've created a new effects send track and then turn it up about halfway. And let's go into this send track and just start adding in the effects. So grab whatever delay that you like. Tape delays sound really good on vocals. And just grab a preset. Most of these have a preset for a vocal slapback. And then on the output mix, just turn it up so the effects are 100%. And next, grab your favorite reverb and find a preset like small room. Perfect. Small room, turn it up 100%. And real quick, you can see here, one of the reasons I like to use this one for tutorials is this one shows you the reflections. The small room is set at like plus 9 dB early reflections and negative 9 dB late reflections. So any small room preset is going to be pretty much like this. It's going to focus on the early reflections, which is great. And then pull up an EQ on that effects send track effects chain after the reverb and delay. Just put an EQ on next. And take a low shelf and roll off the low end, like up to about 200 hertz or so. That'll ensure that your vocal reverb and delay are not muddying up the low end, which is very helpful. And then grab another node and go into the high mids, somewhere in between 2 and 7K. So I'm going to park this one at like 4.5K. So this is the vocal area of enunciation. We're just going to dip a little bit of that out. I would say actually go down to about 6 dB to be safe. And now we have a really simple near-field vocal effects chain set up, and we have it set halfway, so it's going to be way too loud, but we're really going to be able to hear the effect. Let's take a listen. There you go. And now you would just dial it back to taste depending on each song when you pull this up. One more time. All right, now I'm going to mute it, so we'll hear it dry again. Yeah, really big difference, huh? It's unnaturally dry recorded in a vocal booth, which is ideal, but you want to use this opportunity to create that near field, and this gives you a way to customize it a little bit. Let's turn it back on. Yeah, very nice. All right, and then what you would do is, depending on the song, if this was a really soft, mellow song, you would probably use next to none of that. Just very subtly dial it way back. But if you had a more upbeat song, you could use a little bit more of it. But this alleviates all of the symptoms from using a vocal booth. And whatever genre that you're working in, if other mix engineers are overlooking this step, this is going to give your vocal a little bit of an extra edge and a little bit of extra realism. So there's really no point not to do this. And you really only have to do it once. Like I said, save it to your template and it's there for you to use whenever you want. And now we're going to dial it back a little further so it's almost imperceptible. Right, and now that we have the near field vocal verb and delay really subtle, we'll bring in a little bit of our normal long reverb that we like, and they'll operate together. Let's take a listen. Yeah, very nice. Yep, so like I said, there's really no reason not to do this. It's going to give you a little bit of edge on your vocal performance, and it's going to create a subtle subconscious effect for the listener that just sounds more realistic and more inviting and more relatable. The more realistic your vocal sounds, it just has more of a human, natural feel to it. But yep, there you go. That one little step there will make a big difference. It'll add a lot to your vocal and a lot to the listening experience. I hope that helps. I hope that answers your questions, and thanks for leaving that in the comments. And if there's anything else you want me to tackle, please hit me up, and I'll catch you on the next one.